Yes, guys, it's your boy Hokage here. Um, I released that Afcon video a couple days ago. I just made my channel. It's my what is it? It's the best performing video my channel has ever had after 3 weeks or so of doing this YouTube crap. Um, so yeah, if you watched that video, liked it, commented, whether it was positive or negative comments, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it to the fullest. But something that just kind of confirms for me, African fans are the best. African subscribers, African fans, African YouTube watchers, whoever, Africans just are the best. That continent is just peak on so many levels. So I'm back again with another, since we're building up to Afcon, it's here in now 2.5 weeks. Um, I'm gonna push some other kind of Afcon related content, the content of Africa related content. So I thought, with Afcon coming up, let's do a top 10 African footballers of all time. Let's do a top 10 African footballers of all time. And I want to specify something in this video. This is when I'm looking at these players. So I know a lot, I know of a bunch of African players. Obviously, I had to go back and research some just to incorporate some of the old gen African players and also, look at what they achieved, look at some videos of them. Obviously, some of the players in this list I never watched play live, but I have to still show respect to them, right? You have to, I'm sure it's big in Africa. You got to show respect to the elders, right? So I had to do my research. And something I want to specify before we get into this top 10 is that this is what I'm taking into account. I'm taking into account your not just your career in Afcon. I'm taking into account your entire career. So I'm looking at trophies for the club level, trophies for the club level, trophies for your nation. Um, I'm looking at your consistency at the club level. I'm looking at your impact. I'm looking at if you were a clutch player or not. I'm looking at if you in the trophies you've won, were you a big boy player in that team or were you just a side chick? Were you just a bench player? You know what I mean? So I'm gonna be looking at all these things. I'm not just gonna look at your performances in AFCONs or your performances for the national teams, whether it's a Ghanaian player, a Cameroonian player, Nigerian player. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at everything in total. What these African players have gone and accomplished. Most of them, in Europe, there's one or two that had some accomplishments in African domestic football. But what did you go and do in Europe? What was your impact? But also, what was your impact for your nation? What did you win? Were you a clutch player for your nation? Did you deliver a trophy? That's what I'm going to be looking at today. So for people that say, like, for example, some honorable mentions already, names that are not going to be on this top 10 list, who people might run to the comments and say, oh, Hokage, what are you talking about? Kanu, who played for, what was it, Arsenal, was in the Arsenal Invincibles team. How can you not put Kanu in there? How can you not put JJ Okocha in there? Don't get me wrong, great players. JJ Okocha doesn't make my top 10 because he's lacking trophies and he's lacking, impact and trophies. He was impactful with his dribbling. I mean, I could watch JJ Okocha dribbling videos for hours, don't get me wrong. But his impact, what did you win, domestic level, it just wasn't there. And Kanu, people like to bring up, I was reading a bunch of top 10 lists, and a lot of people have him in their top 10 because he played in the likes of an Invincibles team, but he wasn't even an important player in the Invincibles team. I think he only played 13 games that season. So, just players like that, African fans may run to the comments and say, how can you not have this player? You're crazy. That's the reason why I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at who you are as a player, your play style. How good was your actual football technique? What did you win for your country and club level? Were you consistent? That's what I'm looking at. So with that established, let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. Here we are. Number 10, right away. I should have probably built up to it, but number 10, Roger Mila. Now, I'm going to be honest, guys. This is one of the players I did not watch at all live. Now, I could go back and watch videos, but honestly, he's mainly in here. I know a great player he was. I know for Cameroon, Cameroonian legend. Don't get me wrong. He had the three. I think before he went to Europe, before he went to France, I think he did the three-peat. So 3 league titles in a row in the Cameroonian. I think it's called the Cameroon Premier Division. Well, back then it was called that. I don't know what the name of it is now. He won 2 Afcons for Cameroon, African Player of the Year 3 times, or 3 or 2 or 3 times, I forget. I think it was 2 times, actually. And, for Roger Milla, my dad always told me at the World Cups, man, there was always this guy for Cameroon that would show up and just do crazy things, and it was Roger Milla. He would always tell me, "This Roger Milla guy." So, Roger Milla, some people might go into the comments and say, "How can you not how do you have him at 10? He has to be like 6, 5, maybe even he could be top 5. He could be in the 6th spot." But I'm putting him at 10 because his career in Europe wasn't too impressive for me. Now, that could just be complete, looking at it in hindsight 50, 40, 50 years later. But, in Europe, he went to France and he won some Coupe de France's, but, no league title over there. Just yeah, I wasn't too impressed with his impact at the club level outside of the Cameroon's Premier Division. So that's why I have Roger Milla at 10. Don't get me wrong, I know Roger Milla is an legend of African football, legend of a Cameroonian legend. But listen, when you look at the other players on this list, I really think 10th is a really fair position. I could have even swapped out Roger Milla for a JJ Okocha if I wanted to, but I thought Roger Milla had more money in the bank. He has 2 Afcons, 2-time African Player of the Year. I think he deserved the number 10 spot. So, who do I have at number 9? Michael Essien. Michael Essien is a player. Personally, I love Michael Essien. Now, this is a guy I definitely watched Michael Essien 100%. Michael Essien was just a tank in the midfield. This guy was everywhere on the field. He was just a force. He was really a force on the field. I loved Michael Essien as a player. It's just like Michael Essien, he also, with his impact on the field, when I'm talking about impact in Europe, this guy had impact in Europe. He had 2 League Ons, 2 EPL titles, a Champions League. He was runner-up in the Champions League. It was the 07-08 season against United. Right. He was runner-up in that season. Unfortunately, though, for Michael Essien, I think Michael Essien could be higher on this list if he won an Afcon, but he didn't. He never won an Afcon for Ghana. He never did. He never won an Afcon for Ghana. I think they got second in 2010, and they got third. They got third in two. He was a part of a Ghanaian team who got second in 2010 and third in 2008. But other notable achievements of his, like personal achievements of his, I think he was in the African Cup, African Team of the Year 4 times. He was something I think is a really impressive achievement for him. He was named Chelsea Player of the Year in 2007. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's just a Player of the Year for your club. But when you think of the players that were at that club, Didier Drogba, Lampard, Ballack, John Terry, Petr Cech, he was named Player of the Year that year. That's impressive to me. He for one season when with a club with legends, people like that, he was the Player of the Year. For me, that's an accomplishment that's worth mentioning. And obviously at Chelsea, outside the EPLs, he did play at Real Madrid for a little bit. It wasn't too successful, but also at Chelsea, if you care about it, if not, he did win 4 FA Cups. I mean, that's four domestic cups for Chelsea. Yeah. I think that's impressive too. But when you just look at Essien's style of play, when I think of Essien, I just remember that night of robbery at Stamford Bridge in 09 against Barca, the Iniesta last-minute goal, the handballs, Ballack screaming in the ref's face. With all the drama that happened in that game, I will always remember Michael Essien's goal. Just that shot, it was with his left foot, shot from outside the box with his left foot, top bins. I mean, it was unstoppable against a prime Chelsea. Prime Barcelona. That was an insane goal. That's one of my most memorable moments for Essien. But yeah, Essien, just one of the best African midfielders of all time. Midfielder, enforcer. And yeah, I think 9 is fair. I think with no Afcon, I think even with no Afcon, a lot of people might say, oh, when you're talking about the best African players of all time, you need an Afcon. That isn't necessarily true, because you will see you'll see another player on this list who that doesn't really apply to. I think Essien is one of those players that it doesn't really apply to, because he was so good at the club level. He was still really good for Ghana, don't get me wrong, but he was so good at the club level. I think 9 is fair. For someone who didn't win Afcon, 9 is fair. Now, if he did win an Afcon, say they did win in 08, say they did win in 2010, he could be pushing for top 6th position, 5th position, in my opinion. He was that good. But yeah, Michael Essien at number 9. Who do I have at number 8? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Colo, co We're not talking about Colo Touré. We're talking about Yaya Touré. Ivory Coast. For Cote d'Ivoire. Also, for the people for any if anyone from the Ivory Coast is watching, let me know. Do you guys like being called the Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire? I know it's like the same thing, but do you guys prefer Cote d'Ivoire, or Ivory Coast? Let me know because I don't know if you guys find it offensive. If it's you guys get it called the translated version, or if you guys prefer Cote d'Ivoire. I don't know, but anyway, that was a stupid little tangent. Yaya, Yaya is a guy. I think Yaya. Listen, Yaya hit a peak. I think it was from like 2013 to 2015 where Yaya was fulfilling his potential at Manchester City. But I still think, if Yaya Toure was more consistent and had more of those excellent seasons that he had, especially in 2014 and 2015, Yaya Toure could be a top five African player of all time. Now, if we're talking about talent, he's up there. Yaya Toure is up there in terms of talent. But if we look at everything, I think eighth position is fair for Yaya Toure. He did win an Afcon in 2015 for the Ivory Coast. He was the captain for that tournament. Let me just look down his achievements because I don't remember all the achievements. A UCL, and that UCL was the sextuple with Barca in 2008 2009 season where they won every single trophy possible. So that was with that legendary Barca team. Two La Ligas with Barcelona, three EPLs. And what I think when I say three EPLs, it's important to note that he was part of the team that won Man City's first EPL. He was part of the Balotelli, Aguero. He was part of that. So that's an important part. He was an important player to getting a team who had never won the EPL, the Premier League before, and he got them there. That's a really big achievement for him. Again, like I said, 2015 Afcon, runner up in '06 and 2012 for Afcon with Ivory Coast, four-time African Player of the Year, four-time. That's a lot. Seven times in the African Team of the Year. I think that's the most. I think he has the most inclusions in the African Team of the Years. Seven. So he was consistently one of Africa's best players for a while, but I do think when you talk about Yaya Touré's peak, he never consistently played at his peak. Like in 2014 and 2015, that was his peak. He only had really 2-3 seasons max at his peak. That was from end of 2012, 2013 to 2015. After the AFCON tournament when they won it, he kind of fell off a bit. Pep Guardiola came to City. Obviously, Pep never was able to get the best out of Yaya Toure. That's why Yaya Toure left Barcelona for Manchester City. Um, but yeah, Yaya Toure was an incredible midfielder, box to box. He had such a good strike on him. His dribbling, his ball control. Man, I don't know if you guys would agree with it, but in my opinion, I don't know if you guys agree with it. Let me know in the comments if you agree with this, but I really think there was a lot of similarities between a guy like Yaya Toure and a Paul Pogba. And Yaya Toure gave us at least 4 years of peak, 4 years of peak Yaya Toure. Pogba never gave us multiple years of peak Pogba. So, that's the level of talent Yaya Toure, in my opinion, had. Someone like Pogba, who I think is talent-wise, when you're just talking about talent, Pogba is one of the best midfielders of all time, but obviously he never fulfilled that potential. Yaya Toure at least gave us a number of years where he was fulfilling that potential or close to playing at his absolute best. So I think Yaya Toure 8 is very, very fair. Oops, I went the wrong way. My bad. Abedi Pele. Well, people call him Abedi Pele. I'm going to call him Abedi Ayu. Obviously, I think he the dad or the no, he's the dad, right? What am I saying? He's the dad of Jordan and Andre Ayew. Those bums, they should not be playing for Ghana anymore, but they will both be called up to the Ghanaian Afcon squad. If they are, disregard Ghana. They're not serious if they bring up Jordan. Okay, Jordan Ayew is okay, but if they call up Andre Ayew, disregard him. But Abedi Ayew. Um, I think a lot of people. Here's the thing with Abedi Ayew. So, what people won't like it, but I think a lot of people didn't know of him. Um, especially younger generations, until he had like a FIFA card. They gave him like a FIFA card in the game, and people were like, "Oh man, this," and his FIFA card was really good. I know I'm talking about FIFA, it's ridiculous, but I feel like a lot of people didn't know about him until he got a FIFA card, which is crazy because this guy, a Champions League with Marseille. Look at the players behind him right now. Look at the players. Who's on the left? Marcel Desailly. I mean, look at the players he played with. Look at that image. I love this image, by the way. If you didn't know, or if you don't know, if you're living in Iraq, Abedi Ayew is the guy with his shirt off. He won I think he won two French titles with Marseille, an Afcon with Ghana, UCL with Marseille. I think that's Marseille's only UCL. He also finished 1 year as a runner-up with Marseille, also in the Champions League. He's the African Player of the Year 3 times, and he was in the African Team of the Year 3 times as well. This guy was a fan. When we talk about so, people will go if you search up Abedi Ayew, stats merchants will see it's like, oh man, like he was an attacking midfielder kind of player, but he didn't have many assists, he didn't have many goals. But you have to take into account this was the old football. This is 90s football where assists and goals did not matter too much. The be all end all of a player was not goals and assists. This was back when social media didn't exist. You appreciated players from when you watched them. Now I'm not gonna act like I feel like I was part of the generation where you just appreciated players and watched them because I watched football in the 2000s and the early 2010s before this social media switch, 2014, 2013 after. But he played in a time where people could only see Abedi Pele by watching the games. And anybody who watched him will tell you everywhere I read online because I didn't watch him live. But when I watched the clips, I'm like, wow, this guy was a true baller. This guy was an absolute baller. Technique, his touch, his dribbling was fantastic. Um, you know, Now you could give him a knock like his final ball consistently could have been better, to get those more assists and help his team more. But when you look at the player itself, getting a Champions League with Marseille, which is huge, going runner up also huge. 2 league titles, I think was it 2 or 3? I don't remember because some sites say he has 2 league titles, some sites says he had 3. But I think it's 2. I'm pretty sure it's 2. But yeah, I bet Ayew is a guy. I think I think it's your opinion on how good of a footballer you think he is, but I think he is not the best on this list in terms of football. There will be players later that you'll see that I think are better pure footballers as him than him, but winning a Champions League Marseille, winning Afcon, he has to be in here. He has to absolutely be in here. Ghana, if you're a Ghana fan, if you support Ghanaian football, if you are Ghanaian, let me know. Is he Ghana's best player of all time? Him, him or Essien? Him or Essien? Who is it? Let me go back to him. Essien, Abedi Ayew. What are you guys' thoughts on him? I have Ayew at 7, personally. 6, Sadio. Sadio at 6. I think Sadio Mane at 6 is very fair. And some people, now here's the thing. This could change. If Sadio Mane goes to this AFCON tournament in 2024 and he goes back to back with Senegal, we might need to rearrange. I would rearrange. I might have to put Sadio Mane top 3 if he goes back to back in AFCON. I don't think that'll happen, but if he goes back to back in AFCON, he might push for top 3, if not top 3, fourth position, at least fourth position. Sadio Mane is a guy, I think he was at Salzburg, right? He was at Salzburg. He moved to Southampton. I think he has the fastest hat trick, right, in Premier League history. People start noticing him, and then Liverpool come and swoop up for him. It takes him 1 or 2 years to really hit top form for Liverpool, and then once he hits that top form for Liverpool, when Salah comes in, when Alisson comes in, when Van Dijk comes in, you just see Sadio Mane at his absolute peak. I mean, this guy was a lethal winger, absolutely lethal winger. Unfortunately, because he's in the age of Pep and Man City and that money machine, he only has one Premier League, which was the 2019-2020 season. Remember though, these guys, him and Salah and those guys at Liverpool took Man City to the last day of the season 1 or 2 times, lost the title by 1 or 2 points multiple times. So, to make of it all you want was just, oh, he only has one EPL in Europe. There's context. He's against the money machine and the absolute league merchant and Pep Guardiola. So if people want to knock him for one EPL in that Liverpool team, go ahead, but I won't. One Champions League, two times runner up. In that Champions League for Liverpool, he was probably the most important player for Liverpool in that Champions League, coming up big in huge moments. I think Liverpool fans will agree. Also, in the season they won the Premier League, Liverpool fans will tell you now Salah might have been the more consistent goal scorer, right? But they'll tell you Sadio Mane was, more clutch in the big moments where Liverpool really needed someone to come through for them. People will tell you out of the Firmino, Salah, Mane trio, Mane was consistently more clutch in big pressure moments. Um, Obviously, he has one Bundesliga with Bayern last season. He started off well for Bayern after he got his knee injury. It kind of went downhill for him. That's when he moved to Al Nassr. He's out there in the Saudi Pro League right now. But yeah, I mean, he's an Afcon winner. I think Afcon winner. He was the runner-up in the previous Afcon before they won in 2019, right? In 2019, um, he's been the African Team of the Year 5 times, but he was never African Player of the Year. And I think he was never African Player of the Year because in the time he was really reaching his peak, you had Mahrez, you had Salah, you had these guys doing their thing, and that's why I think he never got an African Player of the Year. But he still was in the African Team of the Year 5 times, which is a lot. Which shows his consistency as one of the best African players in the world for a while in the 2010s and the early 2020 decade. So Sadio Mane at 6. Potentially, if he goes back to back with Senegal, we're looking at Sadio Mane at least in 4th position in the top African ballers of all time. Number 5. Now, this might be my most controversial pick. There's another one I think that might be controversial, but I think this is my most shocking and most controversial pick for my top 10. Listen, let me just give you the Riyad Mahrez accomplishments. Five Premier Leagues, one Champions League, one-time runner-up, Afcon, one African Player of the Year. That's kind of where it stops. But you have to take it into context. He was in a Pep. He was, he wasn't just a bench player for Pep's Premier League titles. This guy was important. This guy was a starter. This guy was scoring in many clutch moments for City and in huge moments to win the title when they were battling against Sadio Mane at Liverpool. I think Riyad Mahrez really is underrated. Again, and his first Premier League, as seen in the photo, as you guys see in the photo right there, was with Leicester. And he was probably the most important player for Leicester that season. Obviously, you had Kasper Schmeichel, you had Robert Huth and Wes Morgan in the back. You had N'Golo Kante and Jamie Vardy. Don't get me wrong, you had Drinkwater, but Mahrez was the most important player. He was consistently, Vardy scored all those amazing goals, but Mahrez was facilitating the attack. He was also scoring. He was also assisting. He was the most involved player in that Leicester team, connecting midfield to attack, creating output, creating goals, scoring goals, being a threat in the Premier League. You have to give him huge, massive credit for that. Obviously, he won an Afcon with Algeria. He was one of the best players at that tournament, if not the best player at that tournament. I really think Riyad Mahrez, in terms of the best African players of all time, is underrated now. I think he's underrated because if you just look at his footballing ability, if we're talking about football talent, I think he's better than Salah. I think he's better than Mane. And when you're talking about, the last Africans, the top African players of the past, the guys who've been dominating for the last 5, 6, 7 years, your Mane, Salah, Koulibaly, whatever, Mahrez, Wilfred Zaha. I think Riyad Mahrez is the most talented out of all those players. His actual footballing ability. When I would watch Riyad Mahrez play, I would think, man, he's such a silky player. He really is his dribbling was so silky. I remember in the Leicester City, he kind of turned into prime Ian Robin at times, cutting into the left, no one being able to stop this guy. And he was a force for 5 or 6 years. And now he went to Saudi to get the bag, I'm pretty sure, after winning the Champions League. With City last season, winning the treble. I really think, and I forgot to put that down. His Champions League was a treble winning season with Man City. So I really think Riyad Mahrez, because I was reading, I was watching videos, I was online. A lot of people had Riyad Mahrez either outside of the top 10 or barely in the 10th position. For me, Riyad Mahrez is absolutely 100% top 5, 100%. You could even put him higher, in my opinion. If you really rate footballing ability and what you could do as a footballer, in your top 10 list, Riyad Mahrez could go higher, 100%. But I have him at fifth. I think fifth is fair. I think fifth is very fair because you'll see the next players. Actually, debatably, you could switch 5 and 4. But who do I have at 4? Didier Drogba at 4. Now, one thing I must preface with Didier Drogba, I do think for the average football fan, I do think Didier Drogba has now become a little overrated because people will look at his big moments. He scored in a bunch of finals. He was a clutch striker, which I take into massive consideration when I'm making this top 10. But he was not a very consistent striker. Sure, he had 20 goal seasons in the Premier League. I think he got up to 28 one time, I think. Maybe my memory's being off, but he got up to high goal scoring numbers for Chelsea some seasons, but also some seasons he would finish up. There was multiple seasons where he finished with under 10 league goals for Chelsea. Under 10. So I do think in this day and age, Didier Drogba is overrated in terms of when we're talking about the best strikers of all time. But when we're talking about African footballers, I think Didier Drogba. The reason why you could switch him with Riyad Mahrez is no Afcon. No Afcon. And it's embarrassing because I think his last game for Ivory Coast was in 2014. The year after, Yaya Toure takes Ivory Coast and they win the Afcon. They went and won without him. I think you have to get, that goes against you. That goes against you. How can you not have an Afcon and then it's not like your team was trash because the year after, Yaya Toure leads them as captain to the African Cup of Nations. But outside of that though, he has the Champions League. You see the picture in one of the most clutch performances of all time. But I still do think that performance is a little overrated now. He was trashed the whole game, but it doesn't matter though. That's the thing about clutch performances. He scored the key goal for Chelsea. And then he scores the winning penalty to win them the Champions League in the Allianz Arena against my own team, Bayern. I still am in the belief that Petr Cech was the man of the match and the biggest hero for Chelsea that night, but Drogba was number 2, 100%. Drogba was number 2. He has the EPL titles. He has 4 EPLs, 4 FA Cups, Afcon top goal scorer in the 2012 tournament, African Player of the Year 2 times, League 1 Player of the Year with Marseille when he was at Marseille. I forgot he had accomplishments with Marseille. But in the end of the day, I do think Didier Drogba is a little bit overrated in terms of overall strikers of all time, but you cannot deny how clutch this guy was. He would any final, this guy would score. In big games in the Premier League against teams like Arsenal, this guy would score. Arsenal fans will tell you. He would terrorize them. But because he did not win an Afcon with Ivory Coast, you could potentially even put him at 5th, 6th. Maybe I was a little generous with 4th, but I gotta recognize the striker. I think 4th is fair, but anything over 4th, I don't think it's possible. 4th is the absolute max. I think you could put Didier Drogba, 100%. You cannot put him higher than 4th because of no Afcon. You really can't. So who do I have in 3rd? Mo. I have Mo in 3rd. I have Mo. You know why I have Mo in 3rd, and you from the fact that Mo is 3rd, you probably can guess who is in 2nd or 1st. You'll see, but you could probably guess who's in 2nd or 1st. It's pretty obvious. Salah, let me just go down through his achievements first, and I'll talk about the player. Again, just like Mane, he has only 1 EPL, so you can knock him for that if you want. But again, he's facing the Goliath in City with all their money and Pep Guardiola, the tactical genius, that bald piece of shit. I'm sorry, Pep pisses me off sometimes, but he has the EPL, he has the Champions League. No, I know Salah has kind of clowned himself saying we're back for revenge against Real Madrid in the Champions League, and then they get dunked on again 1-0, Vinny Jr. scoring the goal, but whatever. 2-time runner-up in the Champions League. Afcon runner-up 2 times. 2-time African Player of the Year. 2-time Swiss League champ when he was at FC Basel. 3-time Premier League Golden Boot winner, and Mane I forgot to mention that Mane was a Golden Boot winner also. It was shared that one season with Salah, Son, and Mane. But Salah, remember, his first Premier League Golden Boot was a record-breaking season when he broke the Premier League goal-scoring record. Now, obviously, that Nordic beast that Nordic tree trunk, Haaland, has come, and he absolutely obliterated that record last season. But he had the record. He came and had a historic return to the Premier League with that crazy, crazy season. He just always kept on scoring and scoring, scoring almost every game. So you have to take that into account. And he's a 4-time African team of the. He's been in the African team of the year 4 times. He's probably going to be he's probably going to be in the next one also. The way he's playing right now, but I think Mohamed Salah. The reason why he can't be put, because this is a top 10 list, but when we're talking about the greatest African player of all time, if Salah can go to the Afcon this year and just win it, then he's in that conversation with the next 2 players on this list. But because he hasn't won Afcon yet, you can't be the greatest African player of all time. Players like what is it? I'm literally blanking on names right now. The players on this list who hadn't won an Afcon, sorry, I'm literally blanking, but the players on this list who hadn't won an Afcon, they're in this top 10 because they were that good. But if you don't win an Afcon, you can never be the greatest African player of all time. The 2 people ahead of him, one of them does, one of them doesn't. Okay, I'll give you that. But I think Salah, for him, for what he's accomplished at the club level, to be considered the greatest African player of all time, especially over the player I do think is the best African player of all time, the player I do think is the greatest African player of all time, who I have at number 1 on this list, he needs an Afcon. He's finished up runner-up twice. Now is Salah's time. It's Salah's last time in this upcoming Afcon to get that trophy, to get that beautiful Afcon trophy. It's his last time. The team is aging a little, but there are some young players coming in that can assist him. But I do think Salah can be higher in the greatest African players of all time list if he goes and wins the African Cup of Nations, 100%, because he has a consistency. The thing with Mane is, now Mane was consistent for Liverpool, right? But Salah has been that consistent goal scorer, goals in bunches, tons of goals. 3-time Golden Boot winner in the Premier League. He's not. I mean, this guy is insane. He's having a great season right now too. Currently, before he heads off to Afcon, I think he heads off to Afcon in a week. Salah's a fantastic player, and I remember when he was coming through at Chelsea, when he came from Basel, I'm like, nah, this guy isn't good. Genuinely, back then I thought, no, this guy's just speed. This guy's just like muscular. He's too robotic. And sure, Mo Salah, when you compare him to Riyad Mahrez, I do think Riyad Mahrez, footballing wise, technique, as a footballer, he's better and more talented. But Salah is more effective. He's not a terrible footballer himself, but he's more effective. Salah is such an effective player. Such an effective player. And he's been the key effective player for Liverpool and Klopp for the past, since 2017, it's been 6-7 years now. And he still is that player right now. Now he might leave Liverpool this season to get the bag in Saudi. Hey, I would too. You've been at the top level for a while now, but go get the bag if you want. But I remember him coming through. I thought he was trash. He goes to Serie A. He plays at Fiorentina, loan to Roma. Then he has 2 great seasons at Roma. And then I thought, okay, maybe he's just going to be one of those guys that stays in Serie A, revives his career in Serie A, and whatever. He'll be known as a decent player. But no, he comes to the Premier League. And, Liverpool wasn't this Premier League challenger at the time. 100% not. And Salah comes, and all of a sudden, this guy's just scoring goals. And I'm just like, whoa, what's going on here? Who is this Afro-looking guy going here scoring goals like this? And Mohamed Salah just turned into this consistent goal scorer since then, and one of the best African players of all time, one of the best wingers of all time, just legend. If he could just win that Afcon, you could really put him in the conversation for the greatest African player of all time, in my opinion. So, who do I have at second? George Weah. I have George Weah at second. Here's the thing with George Weah. So, how do you judge George Weah? Because I didn't watch. Again, he's one of the players like Roger Milla, Abedi Ayew. I didn't watch him live. But when I watch the clips, when I see his impact, he's the only African to win the Ballon d'Or, right? And he won the Ballon d'Or back then when the Ballon d'Or meant something. Now the Ballon d'Or is just a popularity contest, right? But back then the Ballon d'Or really meant something, and he won it. So back then you could put a lot of stock into him winning the Ballon d'Or, because that trophy actually had meaning back then. He was a two-time Serie A champ with AC Milan, League One with PSG, FA Cup with Chelsea. Voted the best African player of the 20th century. That's pretty high. That's pretty high praise. I think it was by IFFHSS or something, whatever that football organization is. They voted him the best African player of the 20th century. He was in the World XI 3 times, like World Team of the Year 3 times, and African Football of the Year 2 times. Now, it's a little bit contradictory. I said to be considered like one in the conversation as the greatest African player of all time, you need an Afcon, and that's why I don't think George Weah can be number one. No Afcon. Obviously he's with Liberia, so the expectations are lower. Like, were you ever really going to win an Afcon with Liberia? So you could also cut him some slack on that front. That's why you could put him at second for winning a Ballon d'Or. But when you look at in terms of achievements, maybe I was a little too generous with George Weah in this. Let me know in the comments if you think I was too generous, but maybe George Weah can be lower. Maybe George Weah can be lower, but the fact that he won the Ballon d'Or when it meant something as a striker at AC Milan, that's pretty peak. That's pretty peak. You have to put a lot of weight into that. So that's why I think that's a fair reason for George Weah to be second. Now, obviously, Salah, if we weren't in this, age of Ronaldo, Messi, or whatever, maybe he could have won a Ballon d'Or. I don't know. Maybe that could have put Salah ahead of him, but we'll never know because the Ballon d'Or is just so biased for the last 10, 15 years. It really is. It's become a popularity contest for the last 10, 15 years. So that maybe that's why he couldn't get one. But yeah, George Weah, Liberia, also doing big things as a politician in Liberia. I think he was the president for a bit. I don't know if he's the president anymore. Obviously, his son, Timothy Weah, is playing for the U.S. Fun fact, I have a friend who played against Timothy Weah, his son, in a tournament like 10 years ago. So that's just a little fun fact. But yeah, George Weah, 2. So since George Weah is at 2, I think you could obviously guess who I'm going to put at number 1. It kind of speaks for itself. Samuel Eto'o. I think Samuel Eto'o, absolutely, without a doubt, is the pound for like no one can. Maybe older fans will disagree, but I really do think the Cameroonian Samuel Eto'o is the best African player of all time, 100%. Let me just go through his achievements. 4-time African Player of the Year, 2-time FIFA Pro World XI, La Liga top scorer one season, 2 Afcons, 2-time treble winner. Remember, he won the treble with Barca in 08-09 or 08-09. Pep basically trades him for Zlatan with Inter, sends him to Inter. Zlatan comes to Barcelona. He then goes with under Mourinho and wins another treble with Inter Milan. That's crazy. He won 3 La Ligas, 2 Copa del Reys. Remember, one of those Copa del Reys is with Mallorca. Mallorca, guys. 3-time, and 3 Champions Leagues. And if you care about the Olympics, he also won an Olympic gold medal for football with Cameroon. In terms of achievements, man, Samuel Eto'o, you can't deny him. He was also a clutch player, man. This guy was a key player. He wasn't just a passenger for Barcelona's Champions League teams, that Inter treble team. He was no passenger. He wasn't a passenger for those Afcons. No, he was a key player, man. He was he was one of the leaders of these teams, one of the most dangerous players in these teams. Eto'o, man, when I watch Eto'o, like the speed, first of all, the speed, the intelligence, the control, the finishing. He was such a clinical, lethal finisher. I mean, I think he was probably, the only person on this list that rivals Eto'o in terms of finishing and being clinical is Salah, in my opinion. The only player on this list those two are probably the best finishers on this list, but Eto'o, one of the criticisms of Salah is he's not a clutch player. Eto'o scored in clutch situations. And that's why, maybe Salah at this AFCON, if you make a final Salah with Egypt, you better score in that final, because even if Salah goes and wins an AFCON, I really think I really don't think you could put him over Samuel Eto'o as the greatest African footballer of all time. Absolutely not. I don't think you can. Samuel Eto'o, I think, with the accomplishments he's made, the impact he had in Europe and for his nation, it kind of, George Weah, cool Ballon d'Or, but look at these accomplishments. Look at the impact, the goals, the teams he played for. He's kind of undeniable, in my opinion, the number 1. I think, let me know in the comments who you would have as your number one, but I really don't think, maybe the older fans would say, oh, George Weah should probably be number one. But I think if you're a newer fan or if you had a brain, Samuel Eto'o, absolutely the best African footballer, 100%. And I'm not just saying that because I just looked at some stats and I looked at what he won. I actually watched Samuel Eto'o, 100%. Maybe I'm not putting too much respect for Roger Milla, Abedi Ayu, and George Weah because I didn't watch him live. But from watching, even when I just compare highlights, Eto'o was just a monster. He's a lethal striker. And absolutely, in my opinion, the best player Africa has ever produced. 100%. So yeah, guys, I'm just gonna recap the top 10. Hopefully these animations aren't too ugly. I just did it through slides or whatever. But obviously, recapping, Samuel Eto'o as number one, George Weah in second position, Mohamed Salah, then Didier Drogba, Riyad Mahrez at 5, Sadio Mane at 6, Abedi Ayu at 7, Yaya Toure at 8, Michael Essien at 9, Roger Milla at 10. Listen, I think this is a pretty fair top 10 now. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments your top 10. Let me know if there's any player you disagree with. Let me know if I think I've overestimated someone's accomplishments or them as a player. Let me know if I underestimated anyone on this list and I didn't give them more love or respect. I don't know. This is my opinion. Let me know your opinions in the comments. But for me, I think this is very fair. I think Samuel Eto'o, number one for sure. I think Mohamed Salah, if he goes and wins Afcon, has a case to be called the number one, but Eto'o has 2 trebles, 2 Afcons. I mean, all the achievements. He has the skill. He wasn't just, a passenger in these teams. He has the impact. It's hard. It's going to be hard for Mohamed Salah, even if he wins Afcon, for me to be called the greatest African player of all time. Very, very hard. Very, very hard. But yeah, guys, that was my top 10. Like I just said, let me know in the comments if you made it this far, what you think, if you agree. Let me know if maybe I should have shown more respect. Maybe someone else could have gotten in the top 10. Let me know. Maybe just let me know in the comments your top 10 if you want. If you want to go through the time and put your top 10 in the comments also. I'm active in the comments. My YouTube channel is small, so I'll either like or reply to any comment on any video. 100%. Like I got no life. So yes, guys, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're new, like the video. And yeah, again, thanks for watching the Afcon, my Afcon group stage predictions video. Watch that if you haven't watched it. It's done really well. Thanks for anyone if you watched that. Thank you for watching, and if you liked it or commented, thank you very much. And yeah, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.